Hello, this is Dr. Anthony Delmond. Over the last lecture, we had a very broad look at salespeople, the position, personality types suited to the position, and career options. We also introduced the agricultural supply chain, which we'll come back to in full force a couple of lectures down the road. We're going to pivot now into a discussion of the relationships between salespeople and customers. We'll touch on the role of the company and management, but most of that material we'll reserve for our next lecture. You'll notice how each topic tends to introduce the next as we move through this class. Here are your convenient jumps for this lecture. In this case, they do correspond with the subsections in the text, whether or not the titles match exactly. It's notable that we'll have a few additional concepts in the slides that aren't in the text, and vice versa. Regarding learning objectives, we'll first revisit the idea of the golden rule. We introduced it briefly in the last lecture, tying it to the concept of personal selling, but we'll talk more about it here. We'll spend the bulk of our time discussing marketing management orientations. We'll investigate their history, their evolution, and their ties to the product life cycle. To do that, we'll also need to introduce the product life cycle at a very general level. This is essentially how a product typically performs on the market over time in terms of sales. We'll discuss relationship marketing and three broad categories: transactional, relational, and partnering. As your sales lexicon expands, we should be able to take the general concepts discussed in class and apply them to real-world situations. I'll try to help you in this process by providing a lot of examples, but try to think about evidence of these concepts from your own experience as we move through the material. It's usually a good idea to pause and think about the concepts as we go. That's particularly easy with a recorded lecture. When you start a sales position, you may not have any idea what you're getting into. Your reason for being in the profession could be strictly to make money, or maybe because you really believe in a product. Well, over time, your views about the goals of selling, how you relate to customers, and where you fit into the larger goals of the business industry or even the global economy will evolve. If you entered a sales position because you wanted to make a quick buck, you may realize that connecting people with things they need is your true calling. Or if you believed in a product at the beginning, you may recognize that a good product is only a small part of sales and marketing. That's not to say you started out with a wrong perspective. You'll just inevitably change over time, even if those changes are almost imperceptible, like boiling a frog. If you don't know that analogy, take a minute and look it up. Sales tactics are simply the tools a salesperson employs within their sales philosophy. This lecture is going to be littered with examples, but I'll illustrate one here. For a salesperson with the sales philosophy that the customer is always right, sales tactics might include attempts to keep the atmosphere in a sales presentation very positive and informal, reaching out to the customer very frequently to ask how the product is performing for them. A sales philosophy doesn't need to be boiled down into a catchy phrase like that. Sometimes they're complex and unique to a specific salesperson or company, or even a situation, and likewise, sales tactics might not be the same in every situation either. As mentioned in the textbook, a sales relationship can be viewed in a very similar light to a romantic relationship. Finding or qualifying a prospect or a likely buyer for the product, we'll talk about prospecting down the road, is like arranging a date. You want to find a good potential buyer or partner who's willing to sit down with you and get to know you. Sales presentations, we'll call those sales calls or interviews depending on where we are, but they're all the same thing. Those are the dates. A harder sale is going to require more of those. It's really dependent on the product, the buyer, and the type of relationship you're trying to establish, among other things. Before closing the deal, you'll need to talk about both your needs and expectations and theirs. So why are you jumping into this relationship together? And then you need to gain a commitment to join the relationship. Perhaps this is setting up a contract for repeat business. In a relationship, this might be becoming exclusive or even becoming engaged. In both cases, either party can leave, but there are strings attached. There are 5 key elements that help someone begin and maintain a successful sales relationship. We can tie these to interpersonal relationships as well, but let's drop that metaphor and move back exclusively into the sales world. The first key element is obviously having a desirable product. It goes without saying that an undesirable product is not going to lead to a successful sale. Very few people are in the market for overpriced paperweights or malfunctioning motors. The right market is also crucial. We haven't spent much time talking about markets yet, so we'll say that a market involves the specific audience for a product. If you're trying to sell a tractor in New York City, you're probably not going to have many takers. Likewise, trying to sell expensive farm machinery to hobby farmers, you probably won't do much better. You have to choose the market that would be most inclined to purchase your product. Having an appropriate sales philosophy is also important. The appropriate sales philosophy is product and customer dependent in many cases. If your sales philosophy is about pushing the largest quantity of products, let's say seed, to the largest number of people, in that case farmers, then you might not be as successful with small-scale growers as with those who are willing to buy in bulk. And the tactics you'd use to sell products are also important. Those relate to your philosophy, but they aren't quite the same thing. Pushy sales pitches might not work as well for some folks as others, depending on their personality and buying styles. Last, the follows are really important. Follow-through is where a salesperson does what they say they will. For example, if you set up a delivery schedule for feed, follow-through is making sure you and your team meet that commitment consistently. Follow-up is about reaching out after the sales interview to check on the customer. That's something salespeople should do regardless of the success of a sales interaction. Following up with customers, even those who didn't buy the product this time, is a good way to remind them that you're out there and that you care about meeting their needs. Alright, so the golden rule of personal selling is about treating the customer as you'd like to be treated when you're in the role of customer. It stands counter to any concept of reciprocity. Golden rule salespeople don't expect buyers to provide any tit for tat. They don't expect to be treated nicely back. This is a one-sided, positive way to treat people without any expectations. Do we need a golden rule for sales? As an economist, I would say no. Not explicitly anyway. Salespeople who treat customers poorly probably won't be employed very long in today's customer-driven marketplace. We'll talk about market orientation soon, and that will kind of make things a little more clear how things have changed. There are also regulations at the state and national level that punish behavior that's deemed illegal, and we'll also deal with that in a later lecture looking at ethics and the role of management in the marketplace. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and stop there because I want to make sure that we keep all the material on the marketing management orientations together. So the next thing we'll cover is marketing management orientations.